Well, hello there, and welcome to another book review by your friend John Henry. Today, the book in question is Nothing But a Good Time, the uncensored history of the 80s hard rock explosion by Tom Beaujour and Richard Bienstock. Not sure about the names, but okay, they're two music journalists, and they did tons of interviews over the years, and they got together and they combined all these interviews and created like a narrative where each chapter had a theme, and then they plugged in the individual separate people that played a part in the scene. So for example, okay, like this part about Slash could have been in Wasp. And they have so Eric Stacy says from Faster Pussycat, says our first record came out, and then Tammy Down from Faster Pussycat says something. Then Alan Niven, the manager of Guns N' Roses, talks about the relationship between Faster Pussycat and Guns N' Roses. And so there's these themes, and one person says this, then they connect it to another person talking about the same topic, and they have a different opinion. And it's just funny how you see that what the heck is history really? It's all perspectives, and sometimes people agree on what happened roughly, but a lot of times people's perceptions are a bit different. So it's fun to see how each person takes it differently. And you know, when you think about how you're really gonna tell the story of a whole decade of music from a certain scene or a certain genre, this is a really good way to do that. Instead of like a narrative, like this is what happened then. It's like you just kind of thrown in. It feels like almost like you're watching a documentary, because this producer talks about something, and this guitarist talks about something, then this drummer from another band talks about the same thing, and it all comes together, and you kind of get some idea what the heck was going on. So some of the chapter, there are some good photos of bands. Just one photo section. Got some Motley Crue photos, Cinderella photos, Lita Ford, Warrant, Faster Pussycat. There's Guns N' Roses picture, Skid Row. But it's not a photo book, there's just some in there. So there's this cast of characters thing, which until the last, 15% of the book, I didn't realize it was in alphabetical order, because it's by last name. When I looked at it, I'm like, this is just kind of randomly put together. I was looking at the first name, and so I couldn't. There's a lot of times you come up with, you're reading names of someone speaking, you don't know who they are, and this would have been helpful if I realized it was by alphabetical order at the beginning. Doi. But oh man, this is so easy for me to read, because I was born in 1980s, and I loved heavy metal from roughly 88 or so. And so 88, 89, 90, very influential years to me. And then I was just continuing to listen to that music, and of course other heavy music, as I grew up. But that has the most special place in my heart. So reading about all these behind the scenes stuff, I was always curious about it, so it's just so natural and easy for me to read. Rat and Roll. So Stephen Piercy says, Motley were about a year ahead of us. We'd troll the strip trying to see who the biggest, baddest band was when we moved up to LA. So I didn't know that exactly, that Motley Crue was just a year ahead of Rat. So, cool things like that. And that Van Halen was before Motley Crue, which, I knew it, but just to see where all the bands fall. So like Faster Pussycat and Guns N' Roses' first album, Appetite for Destruction, So they put their debut albums out on the same day, in July '87, but Guns had been around maybe 2 years longer than Faster Pussycat, so they were a more established band, but they did put out their debut album on the same day, and then they ended up going on tour in Europe together. Right after that, Faster Pussycat opening for Guns, which I didn't know. It makes a lot of sense, but yeah, so you hear all about different tours that people went on supporting this band and that band, and you know, the established acts of like Alice Cooper, Kiss, taking people out on the road. Then Bon Jovi became big, and he was taking people out on the road mid to late 80s. And then some bands just go out on their own after a while, and you know, I listened to so much hair metal, for lack of a better word, while reading this book, because I would learn about Cinderella. I never listened to all of Cinderella's stuff, or Faster Pussycat. I never got into them that deeply, ever. And LA Guns, listen to them. Trickster, I was listening to before. They pop up a little bit towards the end of the 80s. Just made me want to listen to everything. And then, of course, I would discover bands on Spotify and stuff that were not in the book. So yeah, if there was another like 3 volumes more covering the same time period with like different characters, I would read those, because this period is just so fascinating to me, in this way of like having the key figures in certain bands. Of course, you get Nikki Sixx and Motley Crue saying something occasionally, Slash, the common guys, but there's a lot of like Brian Damage Forsyth from Kiss speaks a lot. Some of the Faster Pussycat guys are speaking a lot, and then the Beau Hill is a producer, Stephen Pearcy, JJ French. So so you get these like whole cuts of the 80s hair metal landscape, mostly based in Hollywood. You get slices of life, or slices of reality, if you will, of what was going on when this album came out, when this group popped onto the scene, and how they interwove different players. Jakey Lee was in Rat early on, then Warren DeMartini came, and they lived in the same apartment for a while. So Warren DeMartini replaced Jakey Lee, I believe, and they were writing riffs in the apartment at the same time, like without amplifiers. So like Jakey Lee's working on Bark at the Moon riff, and Warren DeMartini might be working on Round and Round or something at the same time, like in the apartment, playing just unplugged electric guitar. It was a lot of desperation is one thing. People just dying to make it, so that's why so many people signed deals that kind of stunk, kind of put them in debt essentially for the next several years. Some bands caught on, so a lot of bands didn't. There were flyer wars and like the deep competition between guitarists. Not so much drummers, but maybe the theatrics. Probably with singers as well. I mean, maybe with drummers, but they didn't talk about it. Of course, the image, and how like Motley Crue really kicked that image off. Loosely based on Kiss, Alice Cooper, and some of the stuff in the 70s, but they really did a whole different thing with image that then people started to copycat. Some made it their own, but some, like Wasp, had a different thing than Motley Crue, but and Poison had a different makeup style than Motley Crue. But this is what people were, those were like the templates. Poison and Motley Crue were being copied a lot. Yeah, I mean, it was just so easy to read, so easy. And I love the way it looks. So you got these big, that nice big space between who's talking. And the chapters were nice length. Like never more than, I don't think ever really more than 10 pages, and sometimes like 5 pages, maybe between 4 to 12 pages. So you could always eat up a chapter pretty quickly, and then you feel good that you got through it and you're on to the next part of the book. But this took me a while, maybe a month, because I was reading, I think, 3 other books at the same time. I'm not sorry it's done, but like I said, I would easily read another 3 of these. I don't think any more books exist in this same format. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's definitely more of this era that I would like to dive into. And then about hair metal dying at the end of the 80s, really 1991, kind of, when Nevermind came out. It's kind of marked. It's like the era of when, like, everyone, the rug was pulled out from everybody, and a lot of bands just were dropped from their labels, and some bands that were about to put out their album, and the label just dropped any support, and they were like on their own. Really weird. MTV is partly responsible for being the tastemakers, how they decide, okay, we don't want to promote this stuff anymore, we want to promote something new, and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains came along, and Soundgarden, so let's try this new stuff. It was a hit. People were responding, so they just focused on that. But it does approach the concept, like, did grunge kill hair metal? And it's pretty much false to say that, and many of the 80s metal people would agree. It's like, it had its time. It was getting oversaturated. It was very shallow, and a lot of copycat bands. Nothing new nothing original was really happening in that scene for a while. Got too many bands on labels for people to actually, for fans to go and buy the albums or see them. So it was just a saturation point, and people were hungering for something new. The new decade came, and and then grunge just was there to step in and fill that void. But if it wasn't grunge, it would have been something else, because it was gonna burn itself out sooner or later. Some of those bands were kind of breaking up before. I think it was Cinderella or Skid Row. No, not Skid Row. Weren't. Well, one of those, maybe Cinderella. I don't know. A few bands. Rat. I don't know. One of them broke up. Oh, White Line. There you go. Sorry. It was White Line broke up like a week or 2 before Nevermind came out. So, like, who was it? Vito Bratta, guitarist of White Lion, said, I laugh when people say grunge killed White Lion, because we broke up 2 weeks before, Teen Spirit even hit. So, yeah, so there was trouble in paradise, for many bands. And then a lot of bands went through changes anyway, like Motley Crue lost their singer, got a new singer, and so that shift was weird. It happened to Iron Maiden too, even though Iron Maiden's kind of a different league, different genre, different scene. But so there were bands that were not covered. Dangerous Toys wasn't covered. I would have loved to hear about them. A number of bands didn't get too much attention, but there's only so much you could focus on, and this is 500. 500 something pages. So that's why I said I could read more volumes of it if it existed, because they're more, and didn't get too deep into Guns N' Roses. Said not a word about Metallica. Of course, Metallica isn't hard rock, part of the hard rock explosion necessarily, but they're from the same place at the same time, so there's a connection. Megadeth, of course, nothing from no thrash metal bands are mentioned at all. I guess that would be a different book, right? But within the hair metal genre, I would have liked to know more about Dangerous Toys, a little bit more about Slaughter. There's quite a bit about Winger, about Cinderella, about Rat. Motley Crue was mentioned a lot. More about Guns N' Roses, I guess, would be nice, although there's other books about that, but yeah, no complaints at all. Fantastic read, great job, guys. Tom and Richard, great job. Highly recommend it. Anyone who's a fan of the genre, or who wants to know about the genre and the time period. It's equally interesting for the time period, the 80s scene, and for the about behind the scenes of the genre. So if you're interested in the 80s in general, but obviously if you're into the music, both there's satisfaction to be found in both curiosities, but I'm interested in time periods and the music, so just so great for me to read this. Anyway, till next time, keep reading them books. Ciao.